most of you because you've met her on screen. I will tell you she is even more interesting and committed and passionate and insightful in person. So I don't think I need to say anything else about her except that she's just very impressive, and now you get to see for yourself. So yes, Barbie.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I still get a little nervous, so please bear with me. So in order to help me feel a little more comfortable, I just wanted to ask you guys a few questions to start. So how many of you have seen the movie? And I'm interested to know like what you guys thought about it, or maybe if you had any questions for me about the film before I start boring you talking about myself. So, is there anyone that has a question? Or, don't be shy, that's my job. Yes.
So, it's not just a question, but one of the many things that I just never had thought about, and every time it comes on when I watch the film, I get just like this, is when you said it's hard to put your children to bed, kind of scolding them because they're hungry, kind of acting like they did something. So, that was just something I never thought about, and that broke my heart, of course, thinking that how to kind of get through such a hard time. And of course, when it comes to food, it just seems so ridiculous.
Yeah, one of the hardest parts about this whole process is that, you know, as I was doing that, no one knew. So when I do these events, and I know that people have already seen that, the hardest part is like admitting it to myself, watching it on screen and knowing that, you know, this is my life and this is something that I had to do, and especially after having my own children watch it, to sort of understand, okay, so this is why she was yelling at me, or this is why I was getting in trouble, and then sort of having to explain to them that, you know, it wasn't really their fault, and that I hope they weren't mad at me for yelling at them. But as a mom, it's one of the most difficult things that you have to do, to sort of get them to respect that I'm scolding them, but also trying to be sensitive to their own emotions, and then also being overwhelmed by everything that I have going on and the fact that I even have to do so. So, you know, thank God I don't really have to do that anymore, but it's still something that hurts me, and it's still something that I relive every time I watch the film. And I still do watch the film, especially when there are screenings. I like to like sneak in the back and just sit amongst everyone so I can see their genuine reactions. And it's always so interesting to me to see how people react to my life, and or watch them as they watch me react to my life. But yeah. Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, for one who has not seen the movie, could you give us a synopsis of the movie about?
Sure. So the film is called A Place at the Table, and it is a documentary about hunger in America. And I was one of, I believe, 8 maybe families that was featured in the film, that basically showed the struggles that I faced as a mother with hunger, living in an urban city, and being a single mom. But they also featured how I'm trying to change things, and you know, sort of some of my trips to Congress, and some of the things that I faced hands-on. They actually do show a time where I basically didn't have anything to feed my kids, and there's this scene where my kids are at the table and they're sharing a can of Chef Boyardee between each other. And so they won't notice that I'm eating less than them. I'm standing in the kitchen eating a sandwich with just one piece of ham, one piece of cheese, no mayonnaise, no anything. And I sit on the counter and I'm just like, I have a Hot Pocket left in my fridge, like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna feed them? What am I supposed to do? And it's actually one of the hardest things that I have to watch when I see the film, because people have gotten a snippet of what my life is like. But me watching that, I know what happened right after that particular moment and what happened right before that particular moment. So I sort of relive everything that I felt every time that I watch it. So it's both a blessing and a curse, because I can see how much I've grown and how much things have changed now. But at the same time, it was a very vulnerable time in my life. And it's something that at the time no one knew, but now it's something that is seen all over the world. And it's sort of like what people will remember me by. So one of the hardest things is also trying to overcome that. And I've said before that, like, I always feel like when I do speak that I have to sort of redeem myself, or I have to prove that, I'm better than I was then. And it makes it difficult, but it's also very inspiring to see how hard things were for me, and the fact that, from the time I was being filmed, now it's 3 years later and I'm still fighting. So that helps me get through. Yeah.
I think what really struck me in watching the documentary was the part where you spoke about that you would like to continue your education, but how do you tell your kids you don't get to eat for 2 years? And that really caused me to reflect on what kind of policies do we have that allow people to work their way out of that situation without harming themselves further, to have long-term goals instead of having to be so focused on the short term of where's my
And through my experiences, I started my hunger advocacy when I was 20 years old. So at that time, my mind was just focused on today and now, and what am I going to do right now, and what is supposed to happen right now, and how can I fix things right now. And that's also one of the things that discouraged me from going to college, because I felt like it was selfish of me, because going to college was my dream. That's not the dream for my children. And in reality, while I'm going to school, it's not going to help them. But I guess as I've grown and matured, I've been able to sort of realize that, life is about long-term goals, and that the longer it takes for you to reach them, the more you grow as a person. And so to update you guys, I actually am in school now. I was invited to speak at the White House, and I went. There I met someone named Emilio Marrero, and he had me go and speak at Esperanza College, which is the college in Philadelphia. And I went and I spoke there, and then after I was done speaking, they took me away to this office with the president and, well, not the president of the United States, the president of the school. Clarify that, because I haven't met him yet. But long story short, he sat me down in this office and asked me, if there was anything I could be doing with my life, what would it be? And, I didn't know who he was at the time, so I said, going to school. And he's like, well, if you can go to school, when would you go? And it kind of threw me off because, here I go. This was one of my long-term goals. And I was like, I'm not sure. I guess, I'll just go when I can, when I go. And, that day, he actually created the first full presidential scholarship to go to Esperanza College for me. So I just ended my second semester a week and a half ago. And I'm a member of Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honor society, so I'm doing really well in school. I'm studying criminal justice, so I have 2 semesters left to graduate with my associates, but I'm actually thinking of just staying and pursuing my bachelor's, because now that I am a member of the honor society, I actually qualify for different types of scholarships. So hopefully, I'll get a scholarship and be able to continue my education. But as far as what else has changed since then, I've learned a lot through trial and error, and I think I've matured a lot because of my situations. And with the life that I've lived, I've sort of been thrown into everything. I was never the person who had any type of guidance, so all of my experiences I've kind of learned head on, and I like that. I'm kind of used to that now, and it's sad to say I always make this joke that like I thrive off chaos, and it's true for me. You know, I faced a lot of challenges, and I'm still facing quite a lot of challenges, but somehow I'm able to be on the honor roll, so I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe if my life wasn't so hard, I'd be lost, and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But yeah, I don't know. Are there any other questions?
I wondered if you could share, I have personally helped fight for foster care rights, because I have 2 children that we adopted from there, and it was a horribly frustrating system. It still is terrible here. And found out how much Congress and all of the people that can help fight to get laws made are not interested because it doesn't get them votes. And I kind of felt that way when you were fighting to get these. They're like, well, we'll give you this, but we're taking away from this program that helps feed these people. Did you find that so personally ridiculous? Because it's so frustrating.
It is, and
I don't think people know that that is what goes on.
yeah. All of my experiences with Congress haven't been bad. I've been advocating for hunger for about 5 years now, and maybe 2 years in, there were significant changes made to the WIC program. Unfortunately, my kids weren't young enough to be able to be a part of the WIC program when they finally made the changes, but you know, I know there are a lot of families that are being helped by that program. So some things have worked, and some things aren't quite working. And I think that one of the best parts of going and speaking to the people on Capitol Hill and going to Congress is that although at times I feel like they aren't listening, I feel like I have the right to speak. And coming from where I'm from, I've mostly felt like no one cared to hear me.
Right.
And even going and speaking to them, at times I felt like they don't care about what I'm saying. But since I've seen the changes to the WIC program, it made me learn that, you know what, these little things that we can do as far as calling our state representatives, letting them know what we agree with, what we don't agree with, what are the things that are important to us as their constituents, is what makes changes. Representative Jim McGovern is a person who is a big supporter of what I do and the Witnesses to Hunger program, which I am a part of, had told me once that for every 1 call that they get from one of their constituents, they estimate it to be the thought of about 2,000 of their members. So if this was what really makes changes, imagine if more people called and said, this isn't working, this is what we need to do, how many changes will actually be made? And I think that people are usually discouraged because they feel like their vote doesn't matter, or that, you know, they're not being considered, or what they have to say isn't important. But I've learned that you really don't lose anything for making that phone call. And that through experiences I've learned that, you know, if you want something changed, you have to change it, and you have to try. And I think that if there's anything that you're unhappy with, that's what you should do. And it doesn't mean that tomorrow they'll make a change, but it means that they can't ignore the fact that they heard something. They can complain and blame us because we're not telling them what's wrong. So if we tell them what's wrong, it's on your conscience. You have to make that decision. And at least now you're educated enough to know what's going on. And one of the most important things for me was expressing that to them, letting them know your decisions are personally affecting me. They're personally affecting my children. And because of that, I have to put my kids to bed without eating because of how you think is the right way for me to live. And it's hurt sometimes, it has hurt me sometimes, having to be that person to express that, and having to admit it to myself, and having to sort of take myself out of my life and talk about it as if it doesn't bother me. But I feel like it's important to share because I was always taught not to talk about what was going on, and that people will judge you if you're different, and that people will look down on you if you're different. But I guess I've had to learn through this experience that I can't carry myself with the opinions of others. And that at the end of the day, if I want changes, it means opening my heart, my family, my life to people. And I know that not everyone will agree, and I know that not everyone will understand, but at least you know now that there are things going on that's different from, you know, not your life, but you know, your life. Any other questions? Yeah.
How is the response done to your involvement in both the movie and now your advocacy within your own community, your own family? What kind of support do you get?
That's a hard question.
Would you repeat it, please? We can't.
Yes, I'm sorry. So she asked, how has the response been to my advocacy work in my community and in my own family? So the movie was filmed 4 years ago. And I was being followed for 2 years, and then it took 2 years to edit, and then it just came out March of 2013. While I was being filmed, no one knew. My friends didn't know, my family didn't know, and that was mostly because of the things that I've gone through in my life. I've been through domestic abuse shelters, so no one was allowed to know where I lived. So it was easy for me to have these people, you know, come in and film me, and it was easy to hide that from my family. So before 2013, when it's like, okay, it's about to come out now, I can't hide it anymore. And, you know, I started being interviewed, and I was on CNN and all these other things. I've had a lot of my friends stop talking to me because not only have I exposed the big secret, but it's like now I'm the different one. And it's been hard to not only have to face this situation, but to have to face it alone. I don't really have much support from my family, and I've even gotten in trouble by like my mom and dad because it's like, why did you say this? Why did you tell people that? And you know, they've been a little mad at me, but this is my truth. And in order for me to own my truth, I have to say it out loud. And it's one of the most painful parts of it because once you say it, you can't take it back. But I guess I've sort of been my own support. And you know, I've kind of fallen a few times, and I've been able to pick myself back up. And it's kind of weird to me, but it's also helped me a lot, is that I have a lot of people that don't know me personally that support me. I have people who have like looked me up on Facebook and Twitter and have just written me random messages about what they think about me or what they think that I do. And when I do have those days where I'm lonely and I feel like, was this the best decision for me to make, I go back and I read that and I think about all the people whose life has been worse than mine and how they don't have the opportunity to speak about it. And that's what keeps me going, because I am someone who people like to listen to. I don't know why, but as long as they're listening, I'm going to speak on behalf of everyone. As far as my community, it was something that was very, very, very bad for me. The neighborhood that I was living in, coming from North Philadelphia, you know, in the middle of the ghetto, while I was being filmed, I had drug dealers that lived right across the street. So then I had my life threatened because they don't know who these camera people are. They just know that there's cameras going around and that, you know, they might catch a glimpse of what's going on. So it was scary. It was really scary. And living alone with my 2 kids made it even scarier. But I went to sleep at night knowing that if something happened to me, at least there was footage of what I was trying to do. And I was leaving some sort of legacy behind. So if something did happen to me, my kids knew that it was because I was fighting for them. And that's what kind of, you know, kept me motivated and kept me going. And now that I'm in school in that same community where everything was going on, I have a great support from the school itself. And it makes me feel good that I can go back there and be different, and that I can motivate those girls and those people who are currently living in the situation that I was in, and that they can know that, you know, there's a reason for everything, and the things that you go through are going to make you stronger, and you just have to keep pushing forward, and that if I can do it, anyone can do it. So, yeah.
I'm curious, is there a spark in your life, spiritual journey where in the midst of the suffering and the struggles, you've sensed a God who is there with you? Is there a spiritual dimension?
It's so weird to say. I was just talking about this last night, that I'm still in my spiritual journey. And I've always known that I believe in God, but I didn't know how to fit myself into a religion. In my moments of hurt and the hardest things that I've been through, I've always known that there's a bigger plan out there for me. And being able to travel and speak, you know, I had someone tell me once that, you know, you're preaching and that I'm doing the work of God. And I'm like, well, I don't go to church, so I'm not doing the work of God. But it was, you know, after seeing the way I've touched people and after seeing the way people react, or even every event that I've gone to, I've always had someone come back and say, I was you, or my mother went through that. And that's what sort of made me realize that I am doing something bigger than what I even understand. And I feel like God is using me, and that He personally selected me to fulfill His duty. And I'm not quite sure what that is. And but I'm glad that I was chosen, because I feel like if this wasn't in my heart, if I wasn't being led by His Spirit, then I would have given up a long time ago, or that I would have used this as an outlet to make my life better. And then once my life got better, I would have stopped. And I think that one of the most fulfilling things about this experience is the fact that I can use it to help others. and that all those stereotypes that people have about me, I'm proving you wrong because I continue to fight for society, for my children, for your children's children. And I think that God will, when He thinks I'm ready, He'll show Himself because I feel like He's been showing Himself all my life, and that maybe I've sort of turned a blind eye to that. But I think that, keeping my faith, whatever that is, has kept me going, and it's helped me survive. Yes.
Tell us the backstory of how you ended up in the movie.
Sure. So when I was 20 years old, my son was he was 3 months when things were really, really bad. I was living in a house that didn't have any heat, and it was in the middle of the winter. And what was happening was that I always call it the eye boogers. I always say that, and I know that's not how you call it. But when you wake up and you have the little crust in your eyes and the mucus, what was happening was that when my son was waking up, he wasn't able to open his eyes because it was frozen. And it started to actually go into his eye. At that time, I was going to school studying to be a specialized clinical technician. And I had my son going to daycare. And I would get constant calls from the daycare, like, you need to pick up your son, he can't open his eyes. And so I would leave and have to take him to the emergency room. After every time I would go to the emergency room, there was this woman who would come in and say, would you mind answering some questions for us? It's completely anonymous, and we'll give you a $10 gift card to Target. And every time I would just say no. And about the 6th time that I was in the emergency room with my son, the doctors told me that he would need surgery because he was actually going blind. And what it looked like at that time was there was like a film on top of his eye. So, I can see the difference in my son. And they said that to repair it, what they would have to do is to take a needle, maybe like about this long, and put it into his eye and drain all the mucus out to try to get the film away from his eye. And I was devastated. I didn't know what to do, and then here comes this lady, like, can I ask you some questions? And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna answer your questions today, just because it was a way to distract myself from what the doctor just told me. So she asked me questions like, do I have a working stove? Do I have a working fridge? Do I have a microwave, and things of that nature? And I answered all of her questions. And I guess the devastation that I felt of what was going on, I also told her about the things that I went through in life. And I told her about how this was happening because I didn't have any heat in the home, and how I was afraid to tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to think I was an unfit mother, or I didn't want the Department of Human Services to come and take my children away. And she was speechless. And, I immediately started apologizing. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I say that? And she asked she's like, I know that this is anonymous, but if you are willing to, give me your phone number and your address, I would like that. So I gave her my address, and about 2 weeks later, I received something in the mail asking if I wanted to go to a free yoga class. So, being from North Philly, I didn't know what yoga was. I thought it was just some fancy exercise thing. So I was like, oh, it's free, of course I'm going, why not? So I went, and after the class, they took me to Drexel University School of Public Health and sat me in an office, and this tall, skinny, blonde, white lady comes in, And I'm like, great, this is DHS, my kids are gonna be taken from me, they tracked me. And she turned out to be Dr. Mariana Chilton. And she told me that she heard about my story and that this is something that she has been fighting for. And she said, she told me about her trips to Africa and Malaysia and all these different places and how she would go to Congress and people will see this well-off white lady and wouldn't take her seriously. And she said she was tired of giving statistics and she wanted to know if she gave me a free camera, if I can show her what it's like to be me. So I said, sure. And I began taking pictures of my life. And my goal was to basically, if I can tell you what was going on without using words and only these pictures, that's what I was gonna do. So the first time that I sat down with her and showed her these pictures, I told her, well, if you think I'm interesting, I have a few people you should meet. And two of my friends from the same street then were given free cameras and started documenting their life. And she started it as a project. The next thing I know, it was 40 mothers from all over Philadelphia sharing their stories through these cameras. And Mariana organized a meeting with us, and I was the baby. I was the youngest one. I was, the first one to experience it. And here I am in this room full of all these strange people. And we all, no matter what place we were from in Philadelphia, we were all facing the same thing. We all knew what it was like to not eat because we wanted to feed our children. We all knew what it was like to not have a stable home. There were many women who were in foster care all of their lives. There were many women who were in shelters at that moment. And we became a sisterhood. And it was so weird to have these unfortunate circumstances be what brought us together. And today, it's not 40 women in Philadelphia. There's women in Philadelphia, there's a branch in Camden, there's one in Martha's Vineyard, there's one in Boston, and it's growing. And while we had these meetings, we talked about having an exhibit. So we had our first exhibit at Drexel University, and all these people heard about who we were, what we were doing, and two of those people that actually attended were Lori Silverbush and Christy Jacobson, which were the filmmakers. And they started to sit in on our meetings after the exhibit and asked if we would mind being filmed and had us sign a waiver. And they're like, we want to record you and we're thinking about making this movie, but we don't have any money and it might not turn out to be anything. Yeah, right. So we agreed to be filmed, and they started following, I think, somewhere between 4 and 7 of the women from the program, and then narrowed it down to just me from Philadelphia. And they were there all the time for 2 years. Like, if I was brushing my teeth, they were there. If I was taking my kids a shower, they were there. When I was cooking, when I was cleaning, they were there. When I was too tired and wanted to go to sleep and wanted to kick them out, they were still there. So it was hard, and there were many times where I can tell that they felt sorry for me. And I'm not really supposed to say this, but it's me, so I'm going to say it anyway. There were many times that they would film me, they would see my fridge, they would see my kids, and then they would leave and come back with groceries. And they explained to me that they weren't supposed to do that, and that one of the most important things about documentary filmmaking is that in moments where I'm vulnerable and I'm crying and that these things are going on, that they're not allowed to step in, and that they can't give me a hug, and that they can't tell me that things will get better, because they needed to capture exactly the moment and what was going on.
And for a long time, it made me feel even worse about my situation, you know, having these ladies feel bad for me. But I had no choice than to accept it because there was nothing there. And, you know, they also told me that the way that they were helping me was a quick fix. And that they were very proud of what I was doing because they know that what they were giving me would feed me today, but then what would happen tomorrow? And we're still very good friends, and well, I consider them to be my friends. And I haven't seen them in quite some time, but when I have those moments of where I feel like my life doesn't make sense, or I feel like I can't go on anymore, or that I'm back where I started. Thank you. I still call them, and they listen, and they try to help me, so I'm very grateful for that. But I never thought from the beginning when I first started doing this that it would actually be a film. So I allowed them to come into my life uncensored, and they saw a lot of horrible, horrible things. And one of my biggest fears was, because I didn't get to see the movie before it came out, I didn't get a copy, I didn't get any clips, I didn't know what they were doing. When I actually saw the film for the first time, it was at the Sundance Film Festival in Utah. So I'm sitting in a room, in a theater with, you know, amongst all these people, and I'm watching it for the first time, and one of my biggest fears was how I was gonna be portrayed as a mother, and also how much of my struggle were they gonna actually put in the film. So it was very scary, and it caused a lot of depression in my life, but when I saw it, I was actually happy, because I feel like they did a very good job of showing how hard I fought and how much I wanted things to get better, but at the same time, what I was doing to make it better, and how I just wasn't one of those people who is the stereotype of someone who is on welfare, of just sitting home and not getting a job and not doing anything to change their situation. So I'm glad that I was able to show people that this is exactly that, a stereotype, and not everyone is like this, and most people aren't like this, and that unfortunately sometimes you're born into a situation and you have to, you know, fight your way out, and that's what I've been doing, or what I've been trying to do. But yeah. Yes.
Have you thought about it? You're in a unique position because you've lived this and you started advocating for it. Do you have a wish list, or have you thought about what we as individuals, what we as a society can do not only to alleviate hunger, but to solve the problems that cause hunger?
I have, and when I first started doing interviews and things of that nature, people would always ask me, you know, what can I do to help? And being a person who has experienced hunger, I would just look at the person next to me like, so what can we do? What are we gonna do? Because I never really thought about the solution. I was just focused on my experience. And as I said, you know, one of the most important things you can do is reach out to Congress and let them know that, you know, what is happening right now isn't working. An organization called Bread for the World actually organized a petition to Obama to start his plan on ending hunger. So I don't know if you guys remember, but when he first went up for election, he said he was gonna end child hunger by 2015. It's right around the corner, and nothing has been done. So that's also another thing that you can do. And
what people usually associate with ending hunger is like donating to a food pantry, and that does help. I was a recipient of you know, the help from a food pantry since I was little. My mom went, and I've had to use it after, you know, as an adult and having my own children. But it's also one of those things that help today, but what about tomorrow? It's something that that I've learned through my experience, that what's said in the Bible, I believe, about teaching a fisherman how to fish is very important. And it's something that's going to take a long time to fix. And I think raising awareness is the beginning of coming up with a solution, because I think that people tend to push this problem under the rug, because when you think of hunger, you envision Africa and people with these really skinny bellies, and you don't really think about what it's like to have it in your own backyard. And I said yesterday also that as hunger became something that's on the forefront and people started to talk about, they changed the name of hunger. When you talk about hunger, you're not really allowed to say hunger anymore, because people associate hunger with things that happen in third world countries. But they came up with this term called food insecurity. And the definition of food insecurity is if you do not know where your next meal is coming from. And although I feel like it softened what people thought about hunger, I think that it also made it very relatable. Because if you think hunger, you think starving. But if you think of, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you envision those people who are working but are not making ends meet. You envision those people who are elderly and have to choose between paying for their expensive medication and buying their own meals or buying groceries. And you start thinking about the cost of these groceries and how fruits and vegetables are more expensive than a can of spaghetti. And they're more expensive than, you know, these items that are high in carbs and sugars and are not really good for us, but they feed us and they give us more, they fill us up more than what one apple would when, you know, the apple's more expensive. And I think that these are all things that need to be openly discussed. And that after raising awareness, it has to go hand in hand with nutritional education. People need to learn how to prepare these meals and how to be able to fit these meals into their budgets. And then comes, you know, taking advantage of farmers markets and programs like, we have something in Philadelphia called Philly Food Bucks. That what that is if you use the SNAP program or you use these farmers market checks, for every dollar you use, you actually get like $2 back to be able to use at the farmers market. So I think all of these things are a beginning to get people to start talking about solutions and to also better educate people, not only on the problem, but how to make their own solutions. Yes.
We live in one of the most segregated cities in fact, most segregated really ever in the country. I don't know, many of us have really a hard time with African American people.
Yeah.
What does we as a congregation that's pretty well off do to establish those relationships? We do a good job in the third world.
I think that before targeting a specific group, they should look around in the room, because I think that everyone struggles and that everyone's struggles are different, but that you know, there might be someone here today that might not have as much as you have, or might hope for an invitation to dinner at your house because they don't have a lot at home themselves. Or, you know, there might be a child at school who's looking forward to that meal because they didn't get to eat breakfast that morning. And I think that coming from, I mean, I'm not familiar with the specific area, but I would imagine that, you know, in my own community, people are always in competition. And you don't let anyone know that, you know, you have less than your neighbor. But I think that if we open our eyes, you'll see there's warning signs. And I think that one of the most important things to focus on are the children. Because I know what it's like to have to be in class and you can't concentrate because all you're thinking about is how hungry you are. I mean, as an adult, imagine yourselves when you're at work and lunch hour is coming and you're like, okay, we're almost there. All right, let me hurry up and finish this, we're almost there. We don't realize that, you know, this is something that's occupying our mind and our time and it's actually distracting us from our work. But it is. And we're adults, we can take care of that. But children can't. And it's our responsibility to make it better for them. And I think that after, you know, working on your own community is when you should start reaching out to other people and trying to help them. And I know that it's difficult because I know what it's like to speak out, so I know how people will be hesitant. And I think that the way to do so is to not make them feel different. Don't make them feel like they're a charity case, but just start off by letting them know that you're there for them, that you're willing to listen, that if they're having a hard day and they need a hug, you can give it to them. That, you know, if they need someone to talk to and they feel like nobody understands, that if you specifically can't relate to them, there's me. Give them my email address. And it's something that I've always done. At every event, I always give some form of people being able to reach to me. And at times it does take me a little while to respond because I am in school and I am a mom and I do travel, but no one goes unnoticed. I was that person that went unnoticed. No one cared about what I had to say, and no one cared about how I felt. And I refused to let my life change and become that same person. So I think that after you take a look at yourselves and take a look at the people around you, you can build that bond that will help you go into other communities and not make people feel like they're less than you, or make people feel like they need your help. One of the hardest things to do is to sort of look past who you are and place two souls together and go beyond race and color and gender and sexuality and, you know, ethnicity, to just eliminate all of that and say, I'm just like you, especially when it comes to social classes and economic classes. But I think that if we look past all of that and become, I guess, more soft-hearted, it'll be easier for those people to accept you as a human being.
Thank you, Jesus. You're nature.
Thank you. Yes. You know, it's something that people have been talking about all weekend, so it makes me feel good. I actually was talking to someone about like trying to brand it, maybe make some t-shirts and wristbands and things of that nature. Because my kids need to go to college, so I might start selling things. But yeah, he asked if I told people what my definition of hope is, and the way I began to explain that was that in the hardest times of my life, I had a whiteboard in my room, and I had a closet door at the foot of my bed. And so every morning, the first thing when I open my eyes, the first thing I see is this whiteboard. So I would always put like, you know, homework assignments and appointments and things of that nature. And one day, you know, I erased everything and I wrote hope. And I just was looking at the word hope. And every day I would wake up and look at the word hope. And I made it into an acronym. And what it meant to me was hold on, pain ends. And every day I went from looking at a blank word that was just hope to looking at hold on, pain ends. And every day as things got harder and harder and harder, I would look at that, hold on, pain ends. And there were times that the pain did end, and there was times that it was replaced by new pain and harder pain. But it's something that helped me get through. And it's something that I still talk about today. It's something that still helps me today, because when I feel like I'm at the bottom of the barrel and at the worst of the worst, I just look at that, hold on, pain ends. And it always does. Don't be scared. Y'all making me scared.
You would tell that though.
Yeah, I think I want to.
Barbie,
Yes.
what hopes do you have for your kids?
That is a hard question for me, because as a mother and as me, I'm very controlling. And it's hard for me to take myself out of the motherly figure and try to open myself up to what they want. And thinking about that, it made me realize how my parents never had a plan for me. And how in doing everything that I'm doing, they don't really care. So as much as I want my children to go to college and be successful, I also want them to pave their own way. But the difference between them and I is that I'll actually be there to help them and to guide them. And if there was anything that I can say would be my hope for my children, would be that, for one, that they won't remember any of it. Because I don't want them to feel like they're different. Two, I hope that they can see that I tried my best to make everything better, and that I fought as hard as I could. And that I'm standing up for them, and I'm facing so much criticism in order to make their lives better, and not only their lives personally better, but their children's lives better. And I hope that if they don't take away anything from this experience that I'm personally having, I just hope that they would see that I'm trying to be a role model for them. And that they're gonna have their own challenges in their life. But that I never gave up. And as much as I've wanted to, as much as I've, doubted myself, and, I still do, that I didn't let that stop me from what I'm capable of doing. And that when I have had those thoughts of, maybe I do deserve this, and maybe I'm not good enough, that my perseverance has overcome that. And that despite what I might think about myself that day, they can see that I'm much more than that. And then, in the literal sense, I hope that they don't ever have to go to a shelter again. That they never know what it's like to not eat. That they're strong enough to endure whatever life throws at them. And that they won't hate me for my decisions. Because regardless of what happens to me in my life, they were in a film that when they're 50 years old is still gonna be there somewhere on Google, on the internet, in the library, somewhere. And I hope that they don't resent me for my decisions and exposing their lives and mine, and that they see that everything that I've done is to try to make things better. Because, you know, as I said, when I started this, I didn't know what was gonna happen, but all I knew was that people didn't know about the problem. And in order to fix something, they have to know the problem first. And I've asked them what they think about the movie, and they just think that they're movie stars. To them, it was cool, you know, seeing themselves on the big screen. And my son actually gets mad watching it when I took them to, when the film screened for the first time in Philadelphia, being as though it's my hometown. I talked to the producers and I got free tickets for my friends and, you know, for my mom and dad to actually come and watch it for the first time. And I felt like that was the best situation for my children to watch the film, because I know what it's like to have people say mean things to me, but I felt like if they were around people that they knew, then maybe it'll, you know, help them as they saw it. And the first time they saw it, when they showed the scene with the spaghetti, my son actually got up and was very angry. And in the middle of the theater, he was just like, "Stop laughing at me." Because he didn't understand that people weren't laughing at him. That, you know, it was like, I don't know why I decided to let him do that. But I saw for the first time how it can affect them negatively, and how he felt like he was the butt of a joke. So in me asking them what they think, to them it's just, you know, we're in a movie, and I've asked them, what do they think about what I do? And even like, what does mommy do besides go to school? And they just say, mommy fights hunger. And if there was anything that they could say about me, I like that it's that.
Could you tell me where this criticism comes from that you're referring to? That you're being criticized for different areas?
Sure. Yes, she said that she wanted to know where this negative criticism comes from that I'm receiving. And I've been to a lot of screenings all over the country, and I've had people at the screenings say some really mean and horrible things to my face. I've had people watch the film and then ask me, well, why didn't you, you know, Puerto Ricans are known for making rice. Why didn't you give them rice instead of a can of spaghetti? And I was standing there like, did you not just watch the hour-and-a-half film? Like, did you not just see me standing eating a sandwich while my kids had to share this can of spaghetti? Of course, as a mother, if I can give them more, I will. And I just think that people who can't relate don't understand. And they tend to make me feel really bad about my situation. Just 2 weeks ago, maybe, I was featured in a front page story in Philadelphia, and I had someone look me up on Facebook and send me a message saying, it looks to me like you haven't missed any meals lately. And I have a problem with like the urge to read the comments when these articles are online, and Mariana and the filmmakers have warned me not to do so. But being the defiant person that I am, I've done it anyway. And it's because I don't want to be blind to society. And I think that me not knowing what people think will only hinder my ability to change things in society. So I do read them, And it does affect me, and it does hurt my feelings, because at the end of the day, I'm human. And I don't usually do it, but because this person chose to look me up and actually write me this message, I went on a rant. And I tried to be as nice as I could. And I said, you know, it's because of people like you that people hurt themselves. It's because of people like you that people take their own lives. And it's because of people like you that we can't make changes to what's going on. And your mother might not have taught you about ignorance, but being as though I'm a mom, I feel like I can do that. And I think that, you know, you should maybe keep your opinion next time to yourself if you're not ready to receive a reaction. And I posted it, and people, you know, commended me, like, you know, we're proud that you stood up for yourself and all of that. And reading the comments sometimes makes me feel like I need to go in and I need to explain why this happened and why that happened. And then I realized that there's no point in that, because that's defending me. That's not defending the thousands of mothers who are faceless standing behind me, going through the same situation. So I don't go back and read anything, but because that person, I feel, targeted me, I targeted him. But it's very hard knowing that I've been doing this for almost 6 years now, and that there's still people who can't understand. And I'm not asking anyone to relate. I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me. What I'm asking them is to open your eyes and notice that there's a different way of living than yours. And that some people are working and still can't provide for their family. And that there are people who have lost their jobs because of the recession, and their sole income is the SNAP program. So that when these budget cuts come in, you're literally taking out of the mouth of that family. And, you know, it's hard to face all of this negativity, and it's really hard not to sort of submerge myself in all those emotions. But if there's anyone that would have to endure it, I'm glad that it's me, because I feel like I'm strong enough to take it. And I'm tenacious enough to come back and say something to you in an articulate and eloquent manner while still offending you slightly. Because sometimes, you know, it's not the answer, but sometimes you gotta throw a few jabs in there just to let them know you're not as weak as they think you are. And I have fun with it at times. But in the end, you know, they call me the face of hunger, and it's a little offensive, but I'm glad that if my name is going to be associated with anything, I'm glad that it's associated with something that is going to change, because I refuse to think that hunger is going to be a problem forever, and that food insecurity is going to be a problem forever. So, you know, if I have to endure all of this, and if I have to personally take all this hurt and all this pain, then it'll be worth it. Because when it's over and done with, I'll be a better person, society will be better, and people won't have to worry about choosing between paying a bill and feeding their family. So to close, as I said, I always give my personal information, because I know how hard it is to sit amongst the crowd and be that person who feels strongly about what's going on, but doesn't necessarily have the courage to make themselves, to single themselves out and have everyone look at them differently. So if, you know, if it isn't someone who's in this room, but if you know someone that you feel could benefit from listening to me or have me listen to them, don't hesitate to write to me, to reach out to me, because it's one of those things that helped me get through everything that I go through. When I know that I can help someone else, I won't give up because I feel like people are relying on me. So my personal email address is barbiefightshunger@yahoo.com. And if you email me and want my phone number or anything, you know, I'll give it to you. But as I said, don't be discouraged to write, even if it's not the first thing you want to talk about, even if it's just that you want to say hi, good morning. Know that I'm here, that I'm very reachable, that I won't turn you away, no matter who you are, what you're going through, even if you can't relate, because I know what it's like to feel like someone turned away from me.
I just want Barbie to know that this may be one of the biggest forum attendances we've ever had. So thank you for that. And Barbie is so eloquent and so articulate and so insightful that I just can't say that enough. To me, she is just the embodiment of grace under pressure. And she's very honest about sharing with you what the pressures in her life are, which is a cause for huge respect, but also she is just so gracious and graceful and giving, and we are so fortunate to have her with us. So I'm sure she'll take a couple of questions if you have any specific ones, but we do need to be mindful of her time because Aiden and Leilani miss their mommy. So thank you so much, and let's have one more. And Pastor Chris, surprisingly enough, would like a group photo. So, it's a mission trip, kids and chaperones.